nào, vì mình cũng còn khá xa với lại cái môi trường công nghệ ở Mỹ. John chia sẻ là ngày hôm nay các bạn có thể ngồi đây và nghĩ điều đó quá xa vời, nhưng chừng 30 năm nữa các bạn cũng sẽ là người ngồi trên đây và nói với lại cái thế hệ tiếp sau về câu chuyện làm sao chúng ta đã phát triển cái nền sensor technology ở Việt Nam. Câu chuyện ngày hôm nay thì John Sculley có chia sẻ là vì tại sao các bạn phải hướng tới những ước mơ như vậy, thì có phải lợi nhuận tiền bạc là quan trọng hay không? John chia sẻ là lợi nhuận nó là một cái hệ quả tất yếu sẽ đến khi các bạn thành công, nhưng nó không phải là mục tiêu để các bạn đưa sự sáng tạo của mình, hướng cái sự sáng tạo của mình đến. Sự sáng tạo của các bạn phải xuất phát từ một cái niềm đam mê tạo ra sản phẩm. Cách đây nhiều năm, những người bạn như là Steve Jobs hay là Bill Gates lúc đó 26 tuổi, họ cũng đầy những tham vọng, những hoài bão, nhưng họ không bao giờ nói về tiền bạc hay lợi nhuận, mà họ thực sự nói về cái niềm đam mê của mình. Vì vậy ngày hôm nay rất là hy vọng sẽ chia sẻ với các bạn, mang đến với các bạn một cái suy nghĩ về những gì hướng tới tương lai cho cái niềm đam mê đó. So the next question that I'm sure everybody is curious about is Misfit wearables. What do they actually do? What is mobile healthcare? And what are we talking about? What is about sensor? And what is the next revolution that John's been talking about? So I guess Sunny will share with us that story.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for taking the time to come this evening to meet with us. We started Misfit Wearables with the view that that wearable technology will be the next revolution, one of the next technological revolutions that we're going to see in our lifetime. You know, most of you here probably have a computer, a laptop, maybe so that was that was the PC revolution in the 80s that John was a leader in at the time. The 1990s was the internet, and in the last 10 years we've seen the mobile revolution take off. And so you have a laptop, you have a smartphone, and now in the post-PC era, you may have a tablet computer, an iPad. Now, what else are you going to want? Are you going to want another tablet, another smartphone? No. Computing is going to move to the cloud, as John was talking about. And it's not just about storage and communication, it's going to be about analytics, doing analysis on vast amounts of data to get insight that was basically not possible in the previous generation. The other place where computing will go is on your body. Wearable technology. Technology that disappears into the fabric of your life, into clothing, into accessories that you might wear, whether they're watches or necklaces or belts, underwear, things that will have sensors embedded to measure your health signals, measure to give you information, that type of thing. And so at Misfit Wearables, we're focused on, first of all, gathering the data in a wearable context. So we're making hardware that you wear, okay? And then with the data that we would generate, the vast amounts of sensor data across the millions of people who would wear our products, be able to generate insights and information about health issues and health conditions that with that kind of insight, be able to deliver breakthrough services to people that just was not possible before, because that knowledge and that insight was not possible before. And so that's what we're working on. We have a bunch of slides. I have some slides where I'll show the stuff, but since we're somewhat limited on time, we need to wrap up at around 8:15 for John. I'm going to wait to talk more about that after 8:15. But that, at a high level, that's what that's the revolution that we're working on.
Xin thưa với các bạn là vì John phải đi lúc 8:15, thành ra để vì thời gian nên hiện nay thì mình sẽ chỉ nói sơ qua về công ty Misfit. Sau khi John đi rồi thì mình có thể nói một cách cặn kẽ hơn. Thì như các bạn cũng biết là trong 10 năm vừa rồi cái sự cách mạng là nằm trong cái hệ thống điện thoại di động, và bây giờ thì các bạn đang có những cái tablet như thế này. Vậy thì cái device kế tiếp là gì? Có phải là tablet hay là cái gì nữa hay không? Thì câu trả lời là những cái device này cuối cùng thì data cũng sẽ được chuyển lên cloud hết. Vậy thì cái câu hỏi quan trọng là nằm trong cái sự phân tích và data analytics sẽ như thế nào để mình có thể xử lý cái lượng data lớn như thế. Thì câu trả lời đặc biệt là trong ngành y tế đó là làm sao đưa những cái sản phẩm này thông qua cái sensor, những cái cảm ứng để mà truyền tải được tất cả những thông tin, thu thập được thật nhiều thông tin về sức khỏe và cuối cùng mình đưa lên đám mây, lên cloud computing và sau đó là xử lý. Vậy thì sau cái buổi ngày hôm nay, sau khi John đi thì anh Sơn sẽ chia sẻ với các bạn cụ thể hơn là những cái công việc mà Misfit đang làm là gì và những cái sản phẩm đó nó nhìn, nó thấy hay là nó làm như thế nào. Và mình cũng sẽ có một số cái sản phẩm demo cho các bạn trong Misfit sẽ trình diễn với các bạn về công nghệ. So, the next question I guess that everybody is curious about is how to succeed as an engineer or somebody who fortunately or unfortunately share their dream in technology. So how can they grow and how should they shape their career in the future? So I would like to pose that question to you, Wayne, as you have a lot of exposure to young entrepreneurs, especially in technology.
Sure.
What would be the most important advice?
Certainly, that's so. I will start with picking up on the question that you asked John, and that is, why am I here? So I am from California, and because we're sitting up here and we feel like professors in a classroom, I have to ask first, or say first, thank you very much for permitting us to speak in English, because I cannot duplicate Christy's beautiful Vietnamese, but it's always an honor to be in another country and to be able to communicate in the best ways that we can. So English is a language that helps us do that. So with that question of English and language and culture and the world, I will ask the first question, and that is, who has heard of California? Hands high. Who's heard of California? Okay, all right. So I'm here. Why am I here? I'm here from California to tell you that California is home of the Silicon Valley, home of many of the innovations that have taken place throughout the current culture. But from a California perspective, Vietnam is incredibly important today. There is a recognition and an understanding that the talent and the energy and the drive that exists in Vietnam is almost like the next generation of what our Western world has seen happening in India and China. But we feel in many ways like it's happening in a more interesting, a more powerful, a more important way. And Vietnam as a country and the educational and intellectual resource that resides here is very well known and very important to the place where I come from. So one of the reasons that I am here, it's my second visit, but is to continue to build the friendships. Sunny and Christy have become increasingly known to me as friends, which is where many important things start, and that is really the first reason that I'm here, is to express to you the honor and importance of what is going on in your country. The second thing that is probably most important is I'll talk about the notion, and it will come under many different words, but integration of thinking, creativity of thinking, interdisciplines, where you take the engineering, the software engineer with the hardware engineer, and how you put all of that together to create something more important. So to start with the thought of integration, I will look at the three of us up here. We all share a common bond in that we have spent most of our careers building not just companies, but new companies that have done things and gone places where no one has gone before. So that is a very common bond, and we can talk about the various companies. But what is interesting to me is that each of us comes from a very different educational background, a very different experience background, and we do what we do today by integrating or learning how to cross over with ideas. So if my time with you tonight is able to do anything, I would like to applaud and congratulate and say terrific for the academic focus that you have pursued to this time. But I would like to also urge you to look out into the future, 5 years, 10 years, and try and see things crossing in the futures, ideas crossing, concepts crossing, where it's perhaps somewhat outside of your core engineering, mathematical, you name your academic discipline, but you're able to see things happening in the future, which is what I think Misfit Wearables is all about, and a lot of the things we've talked about. So I'll come back to that notion of integration, but just to spend a moment on that topic. So John is someone who started out as an engineer, an industrial engineer, but is probably one of the most famous people in America and probably the world with his notion of how to market or sell products to a broad consumer public. And he started with Pepsi-Cola, and actually he told us earlier today he first learned about the industry of these drinks. It was something other than Pepsi. But today, what's the annual turnover of Pepsi today, you were saying?
When I joined Pepsi, it was a little over 200 million in turnover. Today it's 90 billion in turnover.
So this is a man who has watched the growth of an industry to 90 billion US dollar turnover. He then moved from there to something completely unknown to him at the time, which was personal computers and the Apple and the Macintosh and ultimately all of the other products that have come. But he was very much drawn to that industry, but more importantly, that industry, who could have picked anyone in the world, chose John because he had a background that was different than that of Steve Jobs and Wozniak, that were the engineers. They needed something different. So that's what John brought to the party. In Sonny's case, he is an MIT engineer, but he now, as his most important credential, is someone who has taken the mission of building companies. And so he now thinks and is concerned with not just engineering, but he's concerned with product quality, product excellence, whether the consumer or the customer will purchase the product that he's about to make. So he too has taken his expertise and blended it. So to tell you a little bit about my story, it's the same theme of how you become an integrative thinker and how you try and see things out ahead of their time. So I am trained originally in economics. I then did my graduate work in law, so my fundamental basic credential is as a lawyer. I have found my professional home in a law firm, which is one of the first law firms in the Silicon Valley to identify venture capital and all that that involves as the law firm's mission. But as I sit here today, for most of the last 2 decades, I have spent my time in what I like to call the new economy. So the words new economy, again, raise your hands, or is that a phrase that means anything to anyone? So Christy, do you want to say a word about what new economy would mean in Or let me give you a word or two. So, and we won't do this a lot, but basically the notion of always finding where the next fast water is going to be, whether it's at each step along the way.
Wayne có chia sẻ là I will translate the whole thing up to now. John đến từ California, như các bạn cũng biết, và đến đây trước hết là vì tình bạn với lại anh Sơn, và cũng rất là quan tâm và tò mò về Việt Nam. Khi mà hỏi về lời khuyên nào dành cho các bạn trẻ thì cũng như các bạn trẻ biết là các bạn ngày nay bắt đầu từ cái bằng đại học đầu tiên, đó là bằng về kỹ sư. Các bạn đã rất là thành công, đặc biệt là về mặt học vấn, đã đạt được những cái thành công trong việc học rất là đáng khâm phục. Nhưng mà để phát triển hơn nữa thì các bạn cần phải nhìn về tương lai, làm sao để đoán được một cái xu hướng mới sẽ diễn ra như thế nào. Còn nếu chỉ thành công về mặt học thuật thì điều đó không đủ để cho các bạn thành công, đặc biệt là trong lĩnh vực công nghệ. Và Wayne đề cập đến một cái khái niệm đó là New Economy, có thể là một nền kinh tế mới. Có nghĩa là các bạn phải nhìn ra được những cái bước tiếp theo như thế nào, vì mỗi trào lưu sẽ luôn luôn bị lỗi thời bằng một cái trào lưu mới, và hướng về cái nhìn như vậy. Thank you.
Okay, so just to try and finish my thoughts, trying to help you to think about how you can reach to the future where new things are happening that are not apparent to us today. So in my life, I lived in California. The center of the Silicon Valley is where I graduated from law school, but I chose to be a pioneer and move to San Diego, which was at that time some distance from Silicon Valley, and felt to me like a place where there would be new opportunities. And for me, that absolutely became the case. San Diego at the time had two things happening that were important. First, it had been the center of the United States Navy and the United States military since World War II. And so a tremendous amount of government investment had gone into the universities and the military, working on wireless technology, communication technology. How does a rocket ship communicate with the ship? How does a rocket ship communicate with the land? So that was one part of the heritage that was existing. The other part of the heritage that was completely unrelated was in medicine and what was at the time called biotechnology. And a man by the name of Jonas Salk had discovered a medicine to help prevent polio, which was a very, very challenging disease about the same time in history. So we had two parts of our culture building. One was in medicine, the other was in wireless communications. And so as someone interested in venture capital, I used the law as a way to help companies start and become formed and move in all of these various directions. And so as I think then where I found my activities, I look at this bouquet because much of what you do in life is taking many different colors and pulling them together. So we have software engineers, we have hardware engineers, we have lawyers, we have business people, we have marketing people, and it all comes together to build important companies. So now to try and end with the thoughts of the importance of that kind of thinking, of thinking about things that may not be obvious. The first set of companies I got involved with and had the privilege of playing a role as a founder and watching some very nice companies grow were from biotechnology and helping develop new medicines. And so I worked with, in that case, research scientists who helped build new drugs and moved through that part of my life and my learning. I then, through that opportunity of doing much of what Sunny is doing, where I started with a brilliant scientist and the people that were around that brilliant scientist, but I had to bring together the business, the CEO, the venture capital to build the company. That was my first experience in how to build a company. My next experience was from the other area that we talked about, which was the wireless area. And so when I was one of and I guess the third theme is that I've always been willing to be a founder of things, to be the first person to take the step, the first person to do something different. So when I helped open our Silicon Valley law firm in San Diego, one of the first companies that we started was in the wireless area, and it was a company that you may have heard of called Qualcomm, that basically, where's your telephone? That builds the semiconductor chips that now puts 6 billion smartphones around the country. So we watched Qualcomm in much the same way that John watched his Pepsi sales grow to $90 billion. We watched Qualcomm start from a very young, struggling company, much like Misfit Wearables, to today being $100 billion in value and one of the companies that has helped change the face of the earth. I say that as I close my comments because it ties back to Vietnam. My first visit to China was with the CEO of Qualcomm, and the reason that we were there was we assembled a group very similar to this because they were celebrating their 1 millionth download of someone who had taken their Brew platform to build an application for the smartphone. And the person who came forward in this group of people that were probably 500 people from around China was a 14-year-old boy from one of the far-reaching villages far from Shanghai where we were. And this young boy had taken the tools that Qualcomm had given him, and he had built an application for the cell phone that was determined to be the most important winner of the contest. And so here from California, we'd flown to Shanghai. From Shanghai, people had traveled hundreds of miles from the village to receive this award, and it sends the last point of how small and tightly connected we all are. So in closing, my final point of how these two industries came together, it really is what Misfit Wearables is all about and what John Sculley is now spending his life focused on. And that is the way that the technology of the wireless world and the computer world, so for me, the technology that started with military defense and military communications, links up with the same brains that helped cure polio. It is those combinations